Hey guys.
Hello.
I know it's been too long. So sorry. We've been traveling.
Yep.
We lost our assistant. Things have been kind of crazy around here.
Birds' heads are falling off.
What is that from?
From Dumb and Dumber. You remember that?
Oh, you quoted this a few days ago, and I also said, what was that?
Oh, that's right.
And
you grew up in a bomb shelter and never saw great movies.
That's weird that you would say that.
You never saw important movies.
I did see Dumb and Dumber. I just didn't memorize it like you.
Oh, you didn't remember it, which is the next layer of having fallen short.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you didn't see it, that's highest layer. If you don't remember it, then it's where it's
I was quoting Austin Powers by the time I was 7 years old, which is like, who let their kid see
7?
Austin? Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, legitimately.
That's really bad.
Okay.
And that's why we're not, never mind.
We want to let you into a little bit of our process over the last few weeks, maybe the last month.
Yeah.
And we feel like we are in a beautiful struggle right now.
We are facing a lot of different changes in our lives, transitions.
Yeah.
And I'd say the way that we are processing through those transitions is different than we have in a long time. One way that I feel like it's different is that for a long time, we've been the people that have figured out how to make things happen. And
we're just go-getters, you guys. Like if both of us are visionary. I mean, you're a visionary. No, we're both visionaries in different ways.
Yeah, for sure.
We both see things like in a very different way than most people. We're like big picture dreamers. Really, like for me, I really believe God for big things. And I love the journey of like getting to like envision something with God and ask for it and not need it and hold it loosely, but also partner with him in trusting that he is a good God that like wants to give good gifts to his kids.
Right.
Not if they're going to crush us, but like if we are really in this posture of surrender and trust, I love getting to see what God does. But at the same time, we can dream up something and Spence and I will make it happen so fast. Like we're movers and shakers.
Well, I think the other side of this though, is I've seen people that have their default is to hear something from the Lord and then sit on their hands and call it waiting on the Lord. Mm-hmm. And it's actually, those people are scared and are unwilling to face that they're afraid. And there's a lot of people that are honestly like scared of discomfort. And so they avoid discomfort, they avoid pain. And so in their pain avoidant tendencies will do nothing when God's on something. And they'll face resistance and turn away and go, oh, that resistance means that God's not on it. And I think so some of that probably has driven me personally to go, okay, my default is to make things happen until I hear God go.
It's a green light until it's a red.
Yeah. And I'd say on both sides, both of those different tendencies, whether it's like waiting too long or going too hard, they both have different tendencies that come with it and different errors.
Yeah.
And I'd say for ours, and for me, it might be, I need to slow down and actually wait and listen a little bit more and be more trusting versus taking control, the illusion of control and trusting in that.
I'd say your battle is that there is a belief that you're up against, that you're going to be the one to make things happen, that you're going to be the one to provide, that you're going to be the one that opens the doors.
Yep.
And for me, I guess what would my struggle be in this? Just to level the playing field, because I thought of two examples and I wasn't a part of either one of them.
I have a few I can list out if you want.
Go for it. If you can think of one, I'm happy for you too. But I was also thinking about the people who are maybe just like we're going to pray and wait. And there are people that do that in a really powerful, like surrendered posture where they're waiting on the Lord and the Lord comes through, and there's not fear. There's not hesitation. There's not inadequacy. There's no like unhealthy beliefs that are driving them to not move.
Yeah.
But then like you said, there are people where I think it's like the fear of missing it, fear of failing, fear of of getting it wrong can sometimes drive them to not take a risk, when like there is so much beauty in waiting on the Lord and trusting in his word.
Yeah.
But also like God isn't necessarily going to give you direction for every single step.
Right.
Like I think that there are definitely areas in our lives where we need to be waiting on the Lord. And I think it's better to overcorrect and be like, okay, God, am I waiting on a word from you in this? Or like, should I just move?
Yeah.
You know, but I think that there are so many areas of our life where God is way more concerned about connection than he is direction.
Yeah.
And so many areas of our life, if we're actually intimately pursuing knowing him, where he's like, oh, I actually trust you with this. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
You know, and he's so much more worried about our hearts and different things. But we're in a posture right now where I'm really wanting to just wait on the Lord.
Yeah.
Like I kind of feel like God has backed me in all of these moments, and I've gotten confirmation, and we've made big moves and decisions. And now I'm in this place where I'm like, ooh, having a baby, wanting to have more babies, being where we're at in business, having vision for community, having vision for family. I want to be so much more cautious, because whatever we do, I want to feel like it's the move where there's grace on it.
Yeah.
Like that's my whole thing with listening to the Lord, is like whenever you don't listen to the Lord, there's often not going to be grace on the move that you just made. And when we do listen to the Lord, even if it's hard, and even if it costs a lot, and even if we're sacrificing a lot to listen, there's grace on it, you know? So you know that none of it's in vain. And so we're in a spot right now where we're both really wanting to be yielded and surrendered. And we're kind of sitting on our hands right now.
Yeah.
Waiting for direction.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that that's what we've done in the past, even though it's like God kind of has moved with the desires of our hearts and then given confirmation.
Yeah.
Would you say that's true with a lot of things?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But now it feels like, oh, we're in a pivot. And we don't know what that pivot is.
Yep.
And we're waiting to hear, and that feels uncomfortable. And in the midst of that, I find myself really wanting to cling on to security, cling on to what's normal, cling on to the things that feel comfortable. And I'd say in the past, I was way more willing to send it and risk it and be wrong. And I wasn't afraid of failure. But I'm like, oh, I can feel myself really longing for security.
Yeah.
And wanting to hold on to external things to feel okay. Like I feel that temptation right now, which most of the time my immediate heart posture is like, oh, just let go and like trust God. And I feel like I haven't had enough time to even process through that right now. And so I'm sure if I had a little God date, then I would have some, what's the right word? Momentum in this process.
Well, I feel like for me, we have, I've really learned in business that you have to be decisive.
Yeah.
And so even if it's, even if it's like not the best decision, making a decision is super important in business, because you learn from decisions that are wrong more than you learn from decisions not made. And what I see a lot of people do in business that are unsuccessful is they don't make decisions. And I'm like, I've made 50 by the time you made one.
It's true. I've watched you do that over and over and over again.
Yeah, I made 50 decisions, and I did all the work behind, carrying out those decisions. And that's why I learned more than this person next to me that's like still hasn't made a decision about their website or their logo or their name of their business. And it's like, I decided that like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then we decided all these other things. And I'd say what happens though with that is sometimes you can make decisions past what the Spirit's saying, and it can drown out his voice.
Yeah.
And
it's like I'm going to take matters into my own hands.
Yeah. And it's hard unlearning some of that stuff. And I still think like there are so many people crippled by fear. Their journey is different. And I'm afraid when we have conversations like this, that other people will find a license to make formulas out of the things that we say and go, oh, they said, to slow down. And it's like, okay, it gives permission almost to all those people that like, if you've been somebody that doesn't make decisions in your life, this can't be permission for you
Yeah.
to go on that way. To some degree, you're going to have to work that other muscle you've never worked before, and go, I'm going to make the best decision with what I'm facing in this moment. And what we've talked about this so many different times, but it's like, do you ask God every time you put on a shirt in the morning? No, you don't. And some people do at the extremes. And I'm like, well, maybe move past being a slave to God and a friend. He's like, I don't care what shirt you put on, pal. Just bring only two with you.
Be linen.
Yes.
Only.
And only bring one extra and move from town to town.
One garment only.
One garment. Bring deodorant, whatever it is. But we don't invite God into those decisions. So at what point do you start inviting God into decisions? And certain things start feel really big for other people. It feels small for me now with business, making decisions like, okay, cool. Right now, going through 80 applications for a role in one of our businesses, having interviews, deciding, am I going to do this myself or hire somebody? Who do I hire? Those are big decisions for a lot of people when you're like considering paying $100,000 a year to an employee. And I'm like, we're just going to do whatever makes sense. And I'm like, okay, well, I can invite God into that too. And I am aware and surrendered in those moments too. If God's highlighting, no, there's something on this person, I want to pay attention to those feelings and what God's saying. But at the same time, it's like, well, that's a day-to-day thing. It's big problems like that feel big to other people that have now become normalized in a business world.
Yeah.
And then I start to ask myself, it feels difficult for me to go, at what point am I having to enter into a space of surrender again with these things that now feel small?
Yeah.
You know, and I think it can feel that way for us. Like, okay, let's pick up and move. Or it's like, or whatever random big thing might feel like a big thing to some people. I'm like, it no longer feels big anymore, but how do we enter back into God? I want to plug into what you have for us. Yeah.
And for those of you listening too, it's like being aware of what your tendency is and recognizing for you to come to a place of health. It's actually kind of important to go to the other side of the pendulum for a while, unless the Lord is telling you not to specifically. Like typically we actually need to like look at and own like, okay, Spencer's tendency is to just take matters into his own hands and charge and just do it. So right now he's like, okay, what does it look like for me to intentionally slow down and to surrender all of these small things so that if the Lord is directing me in any of them, I can be sensitive and aware of that because I know my tendency and I want to grow in this and I want to grow in my intimacy with the Lord. So as you guys are listening to this, like take ownership for what is my tendency? Why do I have that tendency? Is it rooted in fear? Is it rooted in scarcity? Is it rooted like what did that come from in the first place? And let God's love and grace into why you function the way that you do, but also trust like there's freedom that actually comes from going to the other side of the pendulum and leveling out eventually. Sometimes you swing back and forth a few times until you figure out what middle ground and what health looks like in that area. And I'm not saying like be balanced in everything, because there's a thing about like everything's about balance. And like, I mean, there's truth to it, but also no. But there is a lot of beauty in finding a healthy middle ground with our tendencies, because it's often what leads to freedom.
I mean, how much of what Jesus required from people was balanced, and I just.
Are you saying no? It was extreme. No. Yeah, it was extreme.
There was extreme requests from Jesus towards people's lives. And I think, there are things that have grip over our hearts that we have to face, and it's scary. It's hard, like even him saying it's easier for a camel to enter the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. It's highlighting that when you have something so big as riches and wealth to depend on, it pulls away your dependency on God in the small moments and the big moments and all of that. And that's really sad, not because the person it's sad because that person is missing out on the intimacy and connection that comes with that level of dependence. I was talking to a mentor last week. We've talked about this multiple times since I had this conversation. This is a guy that has written has published 20 or 30 million copies of his book, and has massive influence, but is not owned by it whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it's a person that if he was offered 100,000 people to speak in front of on any given moment, he would, and there was another moment to choose the 6 people to go to, he'd go to the 6 if God was saying to do that. He doesn't care about the numbers or any of it. But also one of the things that he was telling me when we had this conversation the other day is he said that he was brought to his absolute lowest and worst. He had his home taken away, cars taken away by creditors, and they had to move from their family home, a family of 6, living under a 900 square foot roof. And he said that was the most joyful season we'd ever been in at age 50. And just after that, he had written a book and it took off. But he said millions came in, but it didn't own me because of the process I'd gone through. And I'm like, man, I want that. But to hear how he got there, it required a lot of loss from him as somebody that has really hit ground zero in so many different ways. And I think so many of us in our youth, I'm 33 and he would call me a baby when we were talking. We still are holding on to this, like, I want to grow and get here. And we're still holding out for this, like, what's that thing externally outside of myself? This is for me. That's going to tell Spencer he's significant. That's going to tell Spencer he's enough, that he had an impact, that he was enough for his wife. He was enough for his kids.
You are enough.
He was enough for, he was enough for himself.
Yeah.
And I can't always say that about myself if I'm being honest with my own judgments. Is like, do I feel like I'm enough for myself? There are moments where I will say, no, you are not enough for me. You're not significant enough. You're not having enough impact. And if those things are there and I'm not honest with them, then it will continue to drive me into places that are not godly. And I'm going to have to take the reins in areas that God's not asking me to take the reins. He's saying, I want you to trust me so that when you arrive here, you can't take credit. And that magic is well worth the magic of that is going, I got to build trust now with a father.
Yeah.
That I'm not alone. I'm not this quote unquote self-made man. I'm not the person that wrote the book and said, I did it by myself. It's like, that's a lonely place.
And the beauty of that journey is then if and when everything else is added after you sought him in the kingdom, then now you don't have to sustain any of those things. You don't have to keep on running on that hamster wheel over and over again to try to keep all of the things that you acquired, as an example. Again. Yes. It's like now those things don't own you. They actually get to be a gift added. And you, in your heart of hearts, know that you weren't the one that made all of those things happen, and even right now in this journey, like we're in a position where we know we're going to have to be moving at some point just because the layout of our house isn't functional for growing a family. And we love our home. It's beautiful. It's funky. It's this like Spanish style villa. We have like an epic lot and ocean views. Like we were so blessed and we really felt the Lord on buying this home. Yeah. And
put a lot into it too. It's like our sweat, blood, and tears is in this home too.
Yes. And the really cool part is like we felt the Lord the day we viewed this property for the first time. We left it and I was like, wait, babe, I want to take a picture of it before we leave. And we turn around and there's a double rainbow just over the home.
A double rainbow.
And I already felt so excited about the potential of the house. Like it was super outdated, had never been renovated. Like it needed to be gutted completely. And I walked through and I could see it. I was like, I want this place. Yeah. And then walking out and seeing that double rainbow, I just was like, this is the Lord. Like I could just feel it in my spirit. And right after our paperwork went through, and we were in a position where we could definitely afford the home. And right after our paperwork went through, our business almost failed. And we're like, oh my gosh, we just put all of our money into this home. We also took out a loan. We also have already gutted it. And now we have to come up with more money for everything, for the business, for the house, for paying back the loan, all of the things.
We had like an $80,000 outstanding debt with our contractor. We had,
it just all of these materials we still had to buy, money we had borrowed from a friend. We were just strapped. Okay.
We're just like,
and there were many times that we were like, are we stupid? Was this the most unwise decision we ever made?
And we had people validate that when we asked them.
Oh yeah. Like we were seeking wisdom at one point when we were really humbled and on our faces. And there was someone that basically was like, well, the wise thing would be to sell your house, sell your cars, sell your boat, and take that money and sit on it. And we were just like, but then we would be starting over. And then we would still need a house, and then we would still need cars. And it didn't feel like the wise move, honestly. And it wasn't the Lord. That right. Advice was not the Lord. But fast forward a year, our house it doubled in value.
Yeah.
And the market totally had a shift, and the business survived, and we made it, and we had more than enough, and we've been able to pay off our business debt and pay off our friend and pay off the contractor. And now we're starting a new project in the back of the home. And I look at like, oh, if we wouldn't have listened to the Lord on buying this home, we would have used all of our savings to pay for payroll for probably another 6 more months. And we would have been dragging the dead business, and we would have had nothing to show for it. But because we listened to the Lord on buying the home, even though it didn't seem wise right after, we're in this position now where it's like, oh, thank God. Thank God we listened to that. And I want to just finish this thought too. Like now that we're in a position where we're going to need to make a transition at some point in the next few years, I can feel myself wanting to hold on to having the kind of home that I want in the future. Like I love the home we have. I feel very blessed. There's still so much potential.
Yeah.
The house makes me feel a certain way. The rooms are energizing. I love decorating. Like I love the layout. There are all these things that I feel so blessed by. And when I think about moving, and we're in a position where we're not going to move unless we are clear, like 100% clear that it's the Lord. But when I think about moving, I've been having anxiety over what if we don't get the kind of house we want? Like the market's different. What if we can't afford it? I really want a fenced in yard. I want the yard to feel luscious and tropical and safe for my kids. I also want a pool. I also want X, Y, and Z. And I can feel this temptation to find security in the next home. And that's not a bad thing. Like I'm not going to sit and judge like, oh, I want material things. I'm not partnered with judgment over it, but I can feel like, oh, this has power over me.
Yep.
Because of the anxiety that I feel. I can feel myself wanting to hold on to something external to make me feel okay. And homes represent security and safety. And I have compassion and understanding for why my heart really longs to have my home feel a certain way, because we never owned a home my entire life. This, like the home that we have now is the only home that I've ever owned. Like my parents never owned a home. Yeah. We never got to make it ours. We never had permanent furniture. It was always something that was thrifted. We're like everything we had was always broken, used, and we were always relocating every year or two, if not more than that.
Jeez.
And so I really love and crave the stability of a home and a place where I can see myself rooting and grounding and making it my own. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think it's okay to long for that security, but not at the cost of not being surrendered to the Lord.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that's my struggle right now is I'm like, okay, I really want my heart to be in this posture where it's like, Lord, if you tell us to sell the home and move into an apartment and donate all of the money from our home, I want to say yes.
Yeah.
If you tell us that we are going to be in that 1-bedroom apartment for the next 4 years and then you're going to give us the next steps, I want to be willing and I want to say yes. And I don't want to do it dreadfully. I want to do it feeling excited that the Lord's speaking to me and feeling excited to honor that and feeling excited to trust that there must be something so good for us in that. And then on the other side of that, like I so want my heart to be radically yielded and willing to not need anything external to be okay.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I'm at right now is like, I do trust him, but I can feel myself tempted to hold on to a home to be my source of security and safety. And I want to let go of that.
Yeah.
And so I'm in that wrestle of like, ooh, I don't feel surrendered, but I know my heart really wants that. And I'm going to get there. But I need to get some love and comfort and compassion to these places of my heart that feel like, oh, the home is the thing that gives me security, when really I'd be robbing myself of real freedom and real safety and real security if I tried to find it in the home and didn't find it in the arms of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. My journey has been more around influence and business. And that's why I had that conversation with that father figure the other last week. And I really wanted to bring to him, like, hey, I'm processing through some things around influence, around money. Our newest business is already doing almost 300 grand a month. And we started in November. It's multiple partners, but it's already like very profitable. And I'm starting to feel like this kind of feels empty. There's aspects of it. And I don't want to feel that building something. And even with, I started a YouTube channel a year ago, and I noticed at first I was building a lot of business content because I do love business and entrepreneurship. But more than that, I love the journey that I've been on that's brought me life. Mm-hmm. And I haven't seen channels out there talking about entrepreneurship in a way that it brings life to a person. And most entrepreneurship, it's selling entrepreneurship incessantly, when it's like, not every person may be called to own a business, and that's okay. Do I believe that there's a lot of slavery that we enter into, or victim mentalities, when we just choose careers? Like, I see a lot of people are like, the only reason they would ever move is if their job told them to move. And it's like, whoa, that's how limited you are in your life, is that you're at the mercy of your job to tell you what to do. Their schedule, they feel trapped by their schedule that's told to them by a boss. They feel trapped by what their dollar is worth based on what their boss tells them their hour is worth.
They don't believe that there's options.
Right. And I've loved entrepreneurship in that you learn about the market, you learn about value, you learn about these different systems. But, I've really struggled going into like the YouTube, influence game, for instance. And it's so small. I'm at 1,000 subscribers, but I've noticed I've entered into spaces where I'm like, gosh, this is worthless. Only 800 people are subscribed. Only 1,000 people watch this video. And it's like, if I was in a room with 1,000 people listening to me, would I feel the same way?
Yeah.
But there's this weird influencer game and social media game that says you're not valuable unless you have this number next to your name, and this number next to your post, and this number of likes. And it's a very weird game that we've entered into in our generation, where we build our level of significance off of these different metrics that aren't in the kingdom. And I have noticed those are soul draining things that have made me question all of the reasons why I'm doing things. And with my YouTube, I've started going, what if I just had only 500 people or 100 people or 10 people like listen to this, but their lives were changed by the content that I made? And what if that content wasn't because I had tried really hard to get it right and do it the right way, but it was birthed from my own authenticity and who I am? Would that be enough? Would that be enough? Could I do that for 10, 20 years and love it, enjoy it, enjoy learning the skill of communication? What if there were opportunities in that I could miss because I only said yes to the numbers? And in business, when I'm in strategy mode with our partners, like, I'm making decisions based on, okay, what would be the most strategic way to get X outcome? And I've become outcomes focused in all these different endeavors, and I can't control an outcome. I have no way of knowing truly what outcome can come of something I'm working on.
Yeah.
I can, pull from past history. I can pull from the wisdom that's available, the knowledge that's available. And in some cases you can get it right, but not every time. And is it worth it to get it right if you lose a part of yourself? You lose that sense of wonder, that childlikeness, the love and connection you have with people, the trust in God, the joy, that true joy of just being. Can I just feel joy by just existing? Yeah. Not needing a sunset, not needing a beach, not needing a home to be a certain way, not needing a business, not needing a number in my account, not needing a number next to my name and influence. Can I be joyful and have hope in that place? And that's what God wants for us. That's the most freeing place he wants for us. And those are the people he can give things to and know they won't have a hold over their hearts. And I think he wants to. Mm-hmm. But I notice like we are a society driven by our preferences. Every time I hear people talking about the spouse they want in the future, it's based on their preferences. I've done the same thing.
It's a long, I literally found my list. Sorry to interrupt you, but it was painful. I found my list of all the qualities that I wanted in a husband. This was probably a year ago. And I was just like gagging on the inside, thinking about how codependent I was. It was a list of all of the things I needed my husband to be for me so that I would feel okay, so that I would feel secure. I just was like, oh my gosh, like it was a subconscious belief that whenever I had my husband that God had for me, he'd meet all of my needs so that I didn't have to meet them on my own with God.
I feel like I've done a pretty good job.
You do it. You honestly, you do a great job of meeting a lot of my needs, but it's come from actually letting go of you needing to be something for me to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, but like the level of codependency that I think we all struggle with on some level, like I am less codependent than I've ever been because I've faced so much of my codependency. I'm honest about it. I invite the Lord into it. I get the healing whenever the triggers and the pain comes up. But we all have a battle in our souls of being codependent on other things or other people to be okay.
I think codependency is like our modern, graceful, compassionate word for idolatry.
Yes.
I think that's what it is.
It's a good point. It's like, if we look at it from a compassionate perspective too, because it's so easy for us to become aware of things we're idolizing or ways that we're codependent and then enter into the judgment seat over our own hearts.
And then just go to fix it.
In our own lives. Yeah.
Fix the sin.
Or we just feel shame for it and we sit in it and we're like, oh, but this thing is so important to me. And so I'm bad for wanting that and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
It's like Jesus doesn't see you like that.
Yeah.
Jesus is actually like, oh, but if you only knew me, if you only knew how good I was, you wouldn't want to go to that thing anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, if you'd only let me love you here, you would no longer believe that you needed to hold on to that to get your heart desire fulfilled. There's that God-shaped hole inside of all of our hearts that if we're not getting filled by him, we are reaching and grasping for straws at anything else to fill that thing in us. But like how gracious he is that he created us in a way that we were searching for something. And how gracious is he that every time we get that thing in our own strength, every time you've hit the numbers that you had in mind with the business, you're like, oh, but this didn't do that thing for me that I thought it would. This actually can't be God to me. This doesn't give me security. This doesn't make me feel significant.
Yeah.
Right. I just am realizing how empty it is. You know, and if for you women out there that have done everything you can to look a certain way or be a certain way to get the guy, to get attention from the men around you or to feel like you're good enough, whenever you get it, you find out how empty it is. And then the standard keeps getting raised higher and higher, that bar. It's like, well, now I need to do this thing. It's like we all do that whenever we don't know that we're loved. And the only way we know that we're loved is if we're going to the one who loved us first.
Well, anytime you get one of those temporary hits, you have a crash and a come down.
Yeah.
And then what happens when you have the crash and the come down? You need more.
Mm-hmm.
And usually you need it in greater measure, you know, and that's what creates the cycle. And it doesn't mean that you hear all this and go, cool, I'm going to become a monk and have no desires at all for anything that are physical. That's Greek Gnosticism, is hate everything that is in the natural realm that brings pleasure. And that's not the way God designed us to experience life. He wants to have full union with us, that all those things are put in submission to our union with him. You know, I used to read Psalm 37:4, delight in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart, as like, okay, if I'm delighting in him, then I'll have that perfect wife, that perfect job, that perfect income.
And you got her, baby.
But I think now I read that and I go, delight in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. Well, now that I've found delight in him, my true desire is him. And he'll give me more of him. Mm-hmm. And I'm not there yet. You know, I can't sit here and say I'm fully there, but that's what I want. I want to need nothing. You know, when King David in the Psalms said he makes me lie down in green pastures, when he talks about how he says, I have no want. I have no want. You know, I once heard someone that is a nihilist, so I don't listen to a lot of things he said, but I love the way he put this. He said, wealth is not a number, it's a ratio. It's a ratio of how many haves over how many wants you have. And he said, you can increase how many haves you want, or how many haves you have that are wants, or you can decrease the amount of wants you have. And he said, that's wealth. He said, wealth is having more haves than your wants.
That's good.
And that's the kingdom though. It's like, I no longer want because I'm fulfilled. The woman at the well, he says, if you would come to me, you'll never thirst again. And this was a woman that was on her 5th or 6th relationship. And, you know, it sounded like they had some innuendo back and forth. And he's like, hey, baby, you come to me.
You ain't never going to be thirsty again.
And she's like,
I got that living water.
And she's like, give me this water that I may never thirst again. And then he goes into prophet mode and rescues her and her soul at a deep place of knowing her. And I think about that in my own life and I'm like, well, I want to be so quenched, that place. Because as I'm moving into fatherhood, and then I move into like grandfatherhood, my life is going to be about promoting the next generation. Like I want to be in this place where I'm like, all of my life is to serve this floor that my children are going to be walking on. Yeah. That they are thrust into their identity and in connection to God. That's a huge accountability. That's scary when I think about the things that I'm still navigating through, the insecurities, the pain, these things that we're talking about right now. I'm like, that's a huge accountability. I want to be that man that can, you know, really trust God with my children and also be at such a place of fullness that emptying myself doesn't feel threatening. Yeah. You know, such a fullness in God that I'm like, I can empty myself and I don't feel threatened. Love is accessible. Joy is accessible. Hope is accessible. I don't need a thing. I don't need a sense of control to be okay. Mm-hmm. And that's where true freedom lies, is where you don't need an addiction to your control anymore. And I'm not there and I want to be there. Yeah. And I feel like that's the journey that I'm really starting to confront for myself, is like, how can I be in that posture, you know?
I think when you realize what an illusion control is, like, we really are all delusional if we believe we can control anything. Like, that's the thing that's freed me so much in motherhood, is like, oh, I can't control any aspect of my day in my life because this little love bomb steals all of my illusion that I can control.
Our baby, is that what you're talking about?
Anything at any point. Yeah, God, I love him so much.
He's so great.
He's so great. And he strips me over and over and over again. But like, when we realize what an illusion control is and how we're grasping for it to be okay, because we believe that it will give us something if we can control these different outcomes in our life and in our world. Yeah. It's like, man, that is a terrified little kid in us. Yeah. That doesn't believe that they have a mommy and daddy who love them. If we look at this emotionally, it's like, oh, if I felt fully secure in who I was and I was perfectly healthy and perfectly healed, if I was me in heaven, then I would fully know that the Father would take care of me. Yeah. I'd fully know that everything was going to work out. I'd be able to let go of all my lack and scarcity and fear and leap into his arms, fully trustful, fully yield, fully surrender to love, because I would trust his outcome. Yeah. You know, and that he would care for me and handle every single thing, tie up every loose end. And so any anything less than that is my indicator that I'm triggered, is my indicator that I'm believing a lie, is my indicator that there's a part of my heart that doesn't know love yet.
Yeah.
And I don't personally look at that from a lens of judgment for myself or anyone else who's not living in that, like that'd be really high stakes if perfection was the standard. But it's an invitation of like, oh, how much freer could I be if I can look at this area where I'm holding on to control and acknowledge that I feel like a scared little kid here. Acknowledge that it feels hard to trust God. Acknowledge that, wow, I'm actually projecting beliefs that I had about my dad, for example, of like the way my dad didn't show up for me. I'm not talking about me in general. Dad, I love you if you're listening to this. You were great in all the ways you could be. But it's like acknowledge, oh, I didn't feel cared for by my dad in these areas. And so I'm projecting onto God that he is not going to provide for me, that he's not going to take care of me, that he doesn't care about my wants, but he cares about my needs. We all have these beliefs that we're carrying from childhood and from the way that our mom and dad showed up for us and the way that caregivers or pastors and leaders and mentors showed up for us, whether it's good or bad, like we're projecting those beliefs onto God. And so if we can actually discover and explore what some of those beliefs are and where in our experiences they came from, we can take that part of our heart and be like, God, I believe that you don't want to take care of me. I believe that you don't care about my wants. I believe you will take care of my basic needs, or I believe that you're not a good dad. I believe that you would punish me. I believe I have to do things on my own. Whatever that belief is, that's a part of your heart that can be fathered by God. That's a part of your heart that he's jealous for, that he wants to smother in love, that he wants to show you and reveal his true nature so that your heart gets the healing it needs. And then it's easy to trust after that.
Yeah.
And I think that there are definitely times God asks us to just trust him and like trust fall. But from my own personal experience, he really wants to love on that part of my heart. Like he wants me to share with him and be honest about the pain, the fear, the lie that I'm believing, and invite his love in to come and show me who he is and tell me about his nature. And, maybe, for example, you can identify a memory in your childhood of where you felt like your dad was withholding something from you, or your dad took advantage of you. And maybe you say, God, if you were my father in that scenario, how would you love me? What do you have to say about me? Like, who are you? What does your nature look like in wanting to take care of me and provide for me?
Yeah.
Like those questions, whenever we get connected to our emotions, allow a really deep healing to enter in.
Yeah.
And then it's so much easier in the moment, even if it feels scary. It's so much easier whenever God's like, okay, I want you to pull the trigger on this thing.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, like now I'm registering that your nature is good and that you do want to take care of me. And even if I have this narrative and this story still from my childhood, I had this experience with you where you showed me who you were. And so it makes it easier to take a leap of faith in this area.
Yeah.
He's so jealous for our hearts, and the journey that we're on is like, okay, this illusion of control, we don't want to be living in that. We want to be so postured in this place of surrender. And it's so much easier to do when we're actually taking care of our hearts and letting him into those places of our hearts that believe that they need to control things to be okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's like guard your heart, like that scripture, guard your heart. It's not God's job to guard our heart. It's ours. And that's because God's not going to be a controlling God in the sense that he's going to come crashing into your life. He's going to keep displaying his goodness and love, and we get to decide if we want to receive it or not. And it's like the goodness of God does lead to repentance, but we have to be in a posture where we're willing to be affected by that. And I do see people, and it's myself included, that have seared conscience, in different areas, meaning I've just decided I'm going to go my own way. I'm not going to depend. I'm not going to stay vulnerable. I'm not going to stay tender in these different places. And there are a lot of us that have gone, I'm never going to be vulnerable again in one area or another. I'm never going to be poor again. That was something I decided after I lost everything after ministry school. When I couldn't hear God, I couldn't feel him, I couldn't connect to myself. I felt unaffected by people giving their lives to Jesus and healing and miracles. And it's like, I was just so numb, and I was making $800 a month off of, support, people that were investing into me. And I was like, I hate this. And if I want to have a family someday, I'm not going to be able to afford paying for them. And there's some truth in some of that, but I still think that God was willing to let me experience the consequences of going that direction. And he still loved me, but he didn't take away my decision to do that. And I think that's the kingdom we live in, is he's like, I'm going to submit to the decisions we make that destroy ourselves in different areas.
Yeah.
And when you're ready, I'll be the redeeming force that rescues you from it and the consequences. And that's his grace. And I think that's what the kingdom is. And when we experience that redemption from him, we can't not be agents of reconciliation to the rest of the world. Yeah. And that's why it's so important before we start preaching to other people, is that we allow our hearts to be affected by him. We allow our hearts to be affected. Like, I'm so tired of seeing people just get saved only for heaven. It's like, I'm saved, I'm going to heaven. And then going out and preaching the gospel. It's like, you don't know the gospel.
Yeah.
You've heard it and you believe in God, but that's not the same thing. You allowing your heart to get to a place where you have a childlike dependence on him and you are living full. Your heart is full.
It's like you're not getting saved to go to heaven. Like we're getting saved so that heaven gets into us now.
Now we have the ability to produce that culture of heaven everywhere around us on this planet. Like his vision was that the kingdoms of this earth would become the kingdoms of our God. Now, do people that just get saved for an eternal heaven, are those the people that produce that? No, it's the people that got saved for relationship with the Father that is walking with them every single day, that are able to produce that. And I think that means we have to go, okay, as a son and a daughter, am I willing to go there to trust him? Am I willing to go there to make my heart open to the love and the affection he has for me, the things that he wants to bring to me? And I'd say like that to me is the healing journey. Can I correct the views of God that I've had that have been improper, given to me by religious figures, parents, in the moments where I demanded an explanation from God for why a painful event happened and I blamed him? Am I willing to heal from those different images I've had of him that are untrue?
Yeah.
That's the healing journey that I feel like is in a lot of ways has set us free, and also that we're still on,
Yeah. So good. So good. Well, I hope this was helpful for you guys. This is just like raw process sharing. I love that we were before we did this, we were like, what do we want to talk about? Well, let's talk about the ways we're surrendering. Great. 1 hour later, 50 minutes later.
Yeah, I'm like, well, haven't we talked about that before? Like, is there really more topics around surrender?
Literally, my response was like, it doesn't matter if we've talked about it before. A, it's what's happening in our hearts right now, so it'll carry the most weight. And then B, it'll honor the Lord and the kingdom, because I think that he is looking for surrendered hearts, and so we're keeping it real with you guys, letting you into our process. And as always, if this is helpful for you, then please share it with a friend, leave us a review, post it to your Instagram and tag us, tag my Instagram or Spencer's, or link the podcast. Any of that is such a big blessing to us. And it's a way to support us continuing to do these podcasts for you guys.
One thing I just wanted to say on that is that I think we in our generation are always demanding something new, like new information, new content. Even Paul said that it was his goal to call to remembrance. Like it was his calling to call people into remembrance to the things of God. And it wasn't about new.
Yeah.
It was about remembering. It was about actually putting together the things that are meant to impact us as believers. And oftentimes I don't feel like I need something new. I actually need God to go deeper.
Yeah.
So if that's you, keep mulling this stuff over. Allow your heart to go deeper with him and chew on some of the things that maybe got sparked for you. Maybe there's some Holy Spirit God moments for you. And yeah, we love you guys. If this was impactful or any other episode's been impactful, if you could take just a moment to leave a review, it'd be awesome. It's always helpful for us, and more people get to hear about these things. If you want to share it with a friend, that's awesome too.
And as always, you can click any of the links below in the description if you want more content by us. If you're curious about how to heal or how to help people heal, then that information is below.
Yep.
See you next time.
Love you guys. Bye.